Hi there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. I love creative people. I think art and creativity and culture make life worth living, make the bad times bearable, and I love talking to people who do it. Today is part 2 of my interview with Paul Rudnick. He's been one of my literary heroes ever since I read Libby Gelman-Waxner in Premiere Magazine. He's written tons of movies that we love, like The Addams Family Values and Addams Family and Sister Act, which we learned last episode he took his name off of. Also In and Out, Jeffrey, just so many different things. And he has a wonderful new book out called What Is Wrong With You? We talk about that a bit, but this second part starts off with a conversation about his previous novel, Farrell, Covington, and the Limits of Style, which I read when it came out, and it felt like he was showing us new things that we hadn't seen before in his writing, and I talked to him about that. Like, at one point I was reading it, and I was like, oh, he's fucking pissed. So we talk about that. But before we get to that interview, I want to remind you that if you like this podcast, there's lots of things you can do to support it, and I do appreciate it. You can go to DennisAnyone.net and leave a tip in my virtual tip jar. I want to thank Matt J. for doing that recently. I really appreciate it. Also, I'm just going to tell you my Venmo. It's Dennis-Hensley. Right? There you go. You can also subscribe to my newsletter on my website. The other thing you can do is become a subscriber to my Patreon. You join my Patreon. I just did the first episode. I'm going to post the next episode on Sunday. It goes up on Sundays. And man, that first Patreon episode, I love doing these. I'm into it. I talk about different things. I do some So This Happened. Last time I talked about the crush that I said I loved during the movie episode, and he heard about it, and he heard that I put him on my dream board, and he commented. So you find out who that is if you're a Patreon subscriber. So just go to patreon.com and look for Dennis Anyone, and more updates on that as it evolves. But I'm really enjoying the process of doing it. The other thing you do is become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of the Derek and Romaine podcast family, and for a monthly fee, you get my show early, and you get all these other cool queer shows. So learn about that at dnrstudios.com. All right, here now is part 2 of my interview with Paul Rudnick. I want to talk a little bit about your previous novel, Farrell, Covington, and the Limits of Style. I read it when it came out, and as I was reading it, I remember Farrell Covington's very rich, but his family's the worst. Mm-hmm. They're conservative, they're awful, they're bigoted, they're hypocritical, they're the worst. And they really make his life hell. And at one point he one-ups them, and he kind of turns the tables. And I was listening to that, and I was like, oh, Rudnick's fucking had it. Like, there was an anger to it. There was an anger about the world. Like, I find myself, like, sometimes with homophobic stories, I'm like, we're still dealing with this fucking shit? Like, I find a level of rage that is almost like, and I felt like that was in that book a little bit. I don't know if I'm right about that, but I felt like, I'm going to write about sex. I'm going to write about sex clubs. I'm going to write about, and I'm going to turn the table on these motherfuckers. And like, it felt like you had kind of had it, at least in parts of the book.
Oh, no, that's absolutely right. Because I wrote it during the pandemic where it was me sitting in my room.
Right.
And it just poured out of me. It just happened. And it was kind of like it's why I've been having such a great time writing fiction, because it seemed to use whatever skills I accumulated from theater, from movies, from everything. It was coming together. And that was and Farrell just popped out on like the second or third page and just wouldn't shut up. Right. And I just thought, okay, I can't wait to see what he will do next. And there was a slight spark. It's in no way based specifically on the Koch brothers, who are, these billionaires who control a lot of American politics. But there was a gay Koch brother who's dead now. And I think there was a moment at which he was bought off, that I think he didn't become part of the political cabal as his 2 older brothers. And he lived in New York at a very high level. He was a great philanthropist for the ballet, the opera, you name it. He was never openly gay. He did no press. Vanity Fair once interviewed him, and the minute they asked him about being gay, he shut the whole thing down.
Wow.
But I still thought, okay, what was his life like? And at what point did he negotiate that contract? Did he say, okay, if you want me to shut up, if you want me to go away, you're going to pay me?
I get this, this, and this.
Interested me. Yeah, exactly. And I thought, it was an interesting and maybe tormented life, and I didn't want that for Farrell. But But yeah, there's something you just said that was so true, that sense of when you still come up against this stuff, where you hear the garbage that Mike Johnson or J.D. Vance spews, and you say, still?
Yeah.
This is what you do? And then when you see what trans people are going through, where you think, okay, I remember when gay people were at that particular point and being attacked in similar ways. And you just think, really, why? Also because remember when people said that gay marriage was going to be the end of civilization and would destroy straight marriage somehow, and all of that nonsense. And you think, wait, we've had it now for many years, and nothing seems to be going wrong except that people are happier. Right. So why is there still that resistance to the most basic forms of, love and relationships? So yeah, there is a rage there where you think, and it's also because there are now more, LGBTQ, everything people in charge of the means of production. So you will have gay editors, gay publishers, gay producers who say, we want these stories heard. Yeah. And that's still relatively wildly new. Yeah. Where you say, okay, and that there's, God willing, an audience for these stories. Yeah. And it's been thrilling to be part of that conversation, that I think there are every kind of artist who's now able to write about what they really care about. Yeah. So that's great. But it's not easy. And it's why when you still, when they're trying to ban any mention of gay lives from every school book and every library, you just want to say, you are wasting the world's time and resources on battles that were fought and won years ago. It's what people are going through with Roe v. Wade as well, where you think, there's a line in Angels in America that I always sort of cherished, where the character says, after going through, all this horror, says, the world only spins forward. And I try to believe that. And once in a while, the world spins backwards. Yeah. And you think, okay, now I'm going to, strangle myself or somebody else. Yeah. Or a lot of somebody else's, where you think, just the waste, the sheer sense of, no, there are actual problems in the world. There are starving people. There are wars. Why are you focusing on a gay YA novel on the wrong shelf? Yeah, it's crazy that we're there again, but we are. In both Farrell, Covington, and also the new book, What's Wrong with You? They're fun. They're light. They have your wit, and then stuff gets real and serious things happen that might have. What was it like to write that stuff? Would you find yourself crying? Would you find yourself like, okay, I need to take a step away? What was it like to write the more the sad things that happen in these books? No, it was exciting, and that was why it felt like a real step forward for me as a writer. Yeah. In both books, where I thought, no, do everything, and that you don't have to. It doesn't have to be comic on every page, and because also it's one of the benefits of growing older is you think, no, I know what people have been through. I know what I've been through. Right. I need to reflect that. And so I barely even think about making it comic. I think about making it true and making it interesting and being true to the characters, so that this is what they go through. And it also lets you earn a lot more satisfying, development in the books, that it's like, no, this isn't just funny. And if you think I'm letting you off the hook with punchlines, I'm not. So yeah, it's incredibly satisfying as a writer to have it's what we were talking about before, to have every possible tool available. And that, I don't know, that sense of mastery where they say you need however many thousand hours at any particular task to get better at it. Right. But I feel like, okay, I have learned a few things, and that I'm putting them to work, and I'm learning more, and each time I try to push myself more. And it's why I had a wonderful editor once who talked about, when you write something, that you need skin in the game. Yeah. You need to have an emotional investment, which is why when I get to those sections where things are not happy and pretty, and I keep pushing myself and saying, no, go there and then keep going, do all of it. Also around the sexual stuff, like it's more explicit, it's more graphic, it's more, it's edgier certainly than previous things that maybe you've written. Oh yeah. And also that every project makes its own rules, which is one of the reasons I love being a writer, is I thought, okay, in novels, what's so gratifying is you've got this scope, you've got more time, you can take, also you're not saying, oh my God, if they're suddenly in a castle, nobody's going to have to pay, $12 billion for that. You can just go there. And that it's, you just have such full access to all sorts of people and all sorts of lives. And it's, it just feels like things are only getting bigger and fuller. Yeah. And that's what I was aiming for, because otherwise you think, no, then if you're not going to be capable of that, or at least aim for that, then maybe it's time to stop. But it's like, no, these books have felt too satisfying to write, and I hope to read, that they're and that they're unexpected, which I've been finding a lot, both with Farrell and with What Is Wrong With You, that people haven't seen them coming, and they are tickled.
Yeah. There's a scene in Farrell Covington where they go to Studio 54, and I know you met your husband on a dance floor. Did you go to Studio 54 back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I went to all the clubs, and it was a great time to be in New York, because the city was a hopeless mess. It was when there was no money, the streets were piled with garbage, and that created that club culture, which came out of Harlem and about the black voguing scene, and then also about gay men and the earliest clubs in New York. And so and Studio 54 was the first place that really crossed the line between the richest and most famous people. They all got into the club, but also if you were a kid and you were dressed interestingly, or you were sexy, or you had the body, you got in too. So there was this mix.
Right.
And that was new at that time. It's now become pretty much the way of the world. But it was thrilling. I met my husband on the dance floor at the Roxy, which was a huge club.
Yeah.
That was also roller disco at times in sort of far West Chelsea. And it was a great time because it was very romantic. And it was, part of it was, I think, how, as always, New York is kind of both adored by the people who grow up everywhere else dreaming of living there, and the people who are very suspicious of New York and and maybe come for a vacation. But New York was just, a mess at that point. So there was this wonderful combative spirit of, no, we're going to live here no matter what happens, no matter how many times they get mugged on the subway. And that, I remember that there was one night when I was walking home from the Roxy by myself.
Yeah. And
I saw this group of men in the distance. It was all lonely back streets, no streetlights. And they were big and hulking and looked scary. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be killed now. I chose to live in New York. This is what happens. And as I get closer, and they were silent, which was also scarier, I realized they were gay, deaf leather men. And they were signing to each other. And they were in full, regalia. And they could not have been a nicer group of people who also liked to tie each other up and kiss each other. But I thought, okay, this is why I love New York, that I could feel scared for that moment by gay, deaf leather men.
Exactly.
And that they could find a community there. It's also, when you're young and poor, it's way worse than being, old and poor.
Right.
So it was exciting, and it was, I think everyone tends to get a little too nostalgic for their youth because there was just more sense of possibility then. But New York was really raw and real. All I remember on 42nd Street, if you're walking over to Studio 54, it was all porn shops and, broken down movie theaters.
Right.
And there was one porn shop that had an enormous sign in the window, like 8 feet tall and, 15 feet wide, that said anal. And I thought, I want to be the parents of some child walking past that store who asked, Mommy, what's that word? And I loved the idea that it could be as if it were a department store saying, Mrs. Separates.
Right.
But so, Studio 54 and all the clubs had their own personalities. Yeah. So you went to all of them. And then it was also just like life was cheaper back then.
Yeah. What songs make you think of that time when you hear them? What songs take you back to the Roxy and meeting John?
There were the big pop, the big Donna Summer moments when those albums first came out. Then you would follow the DJs, and there would be Junior and Susan Morabito and everybody else who would mix things where, it started a little shard of I Feel Love or Best of My Love or Cissy Houston. And then they take it into this stratosphere. And the songs would last for hours, and you feel their sort of control over the crowd.
Yeah.
And that was thrilling. Also, there was a club downtown, which I include in the book, the Paradise Garage, which was the most racially and gender and everything else mixed place I've ever been to this day, where I've never seen that kind of sort of joyful, non-preachy community where people just got off on each other, and it was so sexy. And it was also in the garage. But it was, I think the economics created that club scene, which now exists a little bit more out in the outer boroughs.
Right.
But it was the first time, and that always feels a little different.
Yeah. You're quite active on Twitter, and some of your barbs are so well observed and hilarious and make me laugh out loud. A lot of them politically related. What do you get out of it? Why do you do it, I guess, is my question.
Oh, I think the immediacy, that there's that sense of when you're working on a novel or a script, it's going to be years before you're finished and you tinker with it and you finally get it out there, God willing. But with Twitter, 2 seconds later, you have a punchline, boom, there it is, for better or for worse. And also what I love about Twitter or X, well, see, now it's I still like to call it Twitter with that sort of, fuck you determination. But it's, there's that sense of a town hall, which Elon has tried to tamp down on, but he hasn't been able to eliminate it entirely, of everybody chiming in. So if you want to know what people are thinking, often in the very worst quadrants of their personalities, you'll get it on Twitter. You'll see what's enraging people. And I think right now we're living in this strange political moment where people are shockingly well informed, sometimes with the wrong facts, but they follow politics as the way sports fans follow baseball. That they really know the players, so you can make jokes about Christy Noem or, Marjorie Taylor Greene and know that everyone's going to get them. Yeah. So that it's fun. And it's also instant gratification where although I can never predict what people will respond to, so you can't tell what will get the most likes or go viral or something. It's totally, confounds me. But there are other people who I follow who I love hearing what they have to say. Yeah. And also there's an immediacy where you get, when there's a natural disaster or some big political announcement, you hear about it first on Twitter. And that's really useful. Yeah. It makes all the other platforms look a little tired. Yeah. We'll see if Elon is able to completely destroy it, but
he's working on it.
But for right now, it still feels a little raggedy, which I like. It's impolite.
Was there a tweet of yours that surprised you with how far it went, or a reaction that it got?
Well, I remember there was one that got more likes and response than anything else, which was very gratifying because it was about, I don't remember her name. It was a lesbian sheriff, I think in Tucson, who'd been kicked off the force for being a lesbian. And then the horrible guy, I remember was that like Ray Arpaio guy who was particularly homophobic, who was deposed. Yeah. And she then was appointed the sheriff. And it was one of the most satisfying moments. And there's a great picture of her wearing the full police officer uniform. And she just also seemed like a great person. And people went for that. And, that was not about anything I was saying. But people went for that sheer event and that information more than anything, which I loved. Because I thought, no, that's really a triumph of good over evil. Right. And lesbians over everyone. So that went big. And I didn't see it coming. And I thought, how wonderful that the world is responding to that woman and to what she went through. And beyond that, I find it's right at the moment, there are people who are so universally hated that those tweets will do very well. Christy Noem right now is just despised. But she did that. She photoshopped that picture of herself with the Rolex and the implants and the hair extensions in front of the prisoners in El Salvador. Right. It was like the world's worst reflection of kissing the Spider-Woman. Yeah. And it was, so if you go after Christy Noem, people will thank you. Yes. Oh, she's it's the sort of worst. Like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are kind of old news in the idiocy sweepstakes. Yeah. Christy and Carrie Lake, who's, a gift. And it's interesting because you also see how Ivanka, who was very ripe for commentary during the first term, has taken herself out of play.
She's in the witness protection program. Because she wants to have her kids have play dates with other, which I don't think she still has no friends. No celebrity will be photographed with her, but she doesn't get that barrage of constant, rancor that everybody, Lara, the dumbest Trump, is also, she will say things that are so, but the other day when Lauren Boebert, during a congressional hearing, confused the director Oliver Stone with Roger Stone. And you think, okay, that's stupid on a whole new plateau, Right. It was just kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
And it's fun to see what they come up with. And the Elon moment will historically look especially nuts. I think when people, however many years from now, say they surrendered the government to an unelected billionaire and gave him free reign over everything.
Yeah.
That's beyond a Batman villain. That's loony. And, but that also makes him ripe for conversation, shall we say.
For sure.
Also because, the thing is, it's like a schoolyard thing where he can't figure out why people don't like him anymore.
Yeah.
And is constantly posting things praising himself. And you think, you don't get it, that will make people go after you 5 times harder when you keep insisting that you're beloved.
Yeah.
And when his mother went online to say, everyone needs to stop being so mean to my son. And I thought, okay, you just gave us so much ammunition.
Exactly. You don't get to be the richest person in the world and then boo-hoo. Like, you can't.
And and your mom can't defend you.
Exactly. During the pandemic, you had Coastal Elites on HBO, which I loved, and Bette Midler, back with Bette Midler.
I love her.
What was it like to have something to work on during that time? Like, it was all remote, right? Like, when you look back at that, you were like, what was that? Like, what was it like?
Oh, it was crazy. Well, that came out of, it was right before the Biden election, not the current, the one, but the one before, where everyone I knew, especially on either coast, was having the most tormented breakdown spirals of all time.
Right.
There was just such terror that Trump would be reelected, and people didn't know what to do. They could barely speak about it.
Right.
And so that was 4 or 5 monologues that just sort of poured out. And we were originally going to do them on stage, the Public Theater.
Right.
And the wonderful director Jay got involved. And that was exactly when the pandemic hit. So it shut it all down. And I thought, okay, this is dead. And then HBO called up and said, well, what if we did something remotely? So we shot all these pieces in the actors' homes or in the, the little shed behind their homes. And sometimes they'd build a little set, but there were, the tiniest crews because you couldn't have anyone around anybody. And those actors were amazing because they memorized these long
Right, they were big,
speeches.
long monologues, yeah.
And it was sort of electric. And when we shot them, everyone involved was in a different state, literally, that Jay was in California, I was in New York, Bette would be upstate New York, and we were all on like 5 different apps at the same time. So it was nothing I'd ever experienced. And it was, exciting, but it was also so nerve-wracking because you never knew who else was on your app.
Right.
But it somehow worked. But I think everyone was in the same boat of anxiety. And so that fueled all of it. And I think, and that piece it ended up being sort of controversial. Some people liked it, some people hated it. But I think it still reflects the mania of that time.
Yeah.
Which right now we're in it's different. It's sort of even darker because people, and it's something that I've had to deal with. It's like, okay, how do you leave your house in the morning without screaming?
Right.
And that you really have to figure out a way to manage your brain. But back then, that was the first time around, it was just the sense of, I'm going to strangle a stop sign, that you have to get. And I thought that piece was, and the one that Bette did about a woman who goes to a coffee shop where there's a guy wearing a MAGA hat in Manhattan.
She loses it. Yeah.
That really happened to me.
Yeah.
There was a guy, and I thought, and because we were New Yorkers, it was like no one was going to say anything to him because we weren't going to give him the satisfaction.
Right.
But I thought that's interesting that he feels driven to be offensive on that level. So my revenge was writing that piece that did brilliantly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so it was, and then it was there. So it was the weirdest confluence of disease and show business.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful to HBO for airing it, and for Jay for doing such a great job with it, that it was crazy. And also it was a moment when everyone in show business thought they would never work again.
Yeah. So
because the pandemic, remember those early days where it was like, no, the world is over.
Right. When we don't know when we're going to have sets again. So it was Dan Levy, it was Issa Rae, it was Bette Midler, Sarah Paulson,
Caitlin Dever.
Caitlin Dever, yes, that was the one I was missing.
Well, one of my favorite moments was Sarah Paulson, who was just a genius. She was shooting in the sort of casita, this is very LA, behind her house in LA. And usually on the last day of shooting for any given actor or star, when they've done their last scene, the assistant director will say, and that's a wrap for, Sarah Paulson, and everybody claps and they get in their car and they go home.
Yeah.
Well, because Sarah was shooting behind her house, when remotely someone said, that's a wrap for Sarah Paulson, she waved and we all clapped remotely and she walked 5 feet. And so it was such a strange Hollywood, moment. Yeah. But yeah, they were all just dreams. They worked so hard.
Well, they had to memorize all those things. Would they do them a few times and you guys picked the best take? Or was it like, once we get it, we got it?
Yeah. No, it was so nuts. I remember Bette, whose speech was really long, she would do it, and then she would immediately doubt herself and say, let me do it again, let me do it again. Oh. And we let her because it was so much fun to watch her.
Yeah.
But it was, there was very little editing. I think there was some, but there was that sense of they were so adrenalized.
Yeah.
And I think especially because it was so weird because they were going right to camera, which you almost never get to do.
Right.
And it was the weirdness of that time. So it was, everything was fueled towards the work rather than, you weren't on a sound stage with a lot of people handing you bottles of water.
Yeah. You mentioned In and Out before. I wanted to bring up one scene in that movie that spoke to me so much, is when he dances alone in his house. Like that was me. Like and dancing was also something you kind of, it was a secret. Like you didn't, if you got caught doing it, it was girly, it wasn't good. But it's a part of my identity, I guess. So talk about that, what you think about that scene or what you remember about it or why you wanted to have that in there.
Oh, I love that scene because it was so unexpected. And we shot it on a set in the corner of, there's a soundstage at the Chelsea Piers in Midtown in New York. And so they built that corner of the Cat Coward's apartment. And Kevin was so blissful because he danced nonstop for like 2 days of shooting. And we had the guy doing the voiceover, the wonderful New York actor, John Cunningham, who was doing the Be a Man tape. Yeah. And because Kevin is so up for anything, we kept adding lines because he couldn't get enough. And Frank Oz was so, just wonderful about. And I was choreographed by Jerry Mitchell, who's a great director choreographer.
Yeah.
Got like 3 shows on Broadway right now. So we had the best talent involved. And we just got high on it because it was and because we had Kevin there so that he would do anything.
And he didn't know what the guy was going to say, the new lines. Kevin hadn't heard them yet.
When the new lines, we would just throw them in and boom. And that never happens in movies. Movies are much more regimented and there's money being spent. Yeah. But Kevin, again, because of his theater background, he just was so up for everything and so funny, and he's a great dancer. Yeah. So we thought, wait, this feels special. Let's keep going. Yeah. And then Scott Rudin as well, who was there saying, yes, whatever you need, I will give it to you, because we could see it in the moment, and that's so rare.
What was the song? I'm trying to remember. What was the song?
The song was Macho Man is at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Was that I Will Survive?
I feel like it's a diva. I feel like it might be I Will Survive.
Yeah, it was a diva. And also it's the kind of thing where you film it with one song, imagining you might replace it with another song ultimately. But I think we used whatever the actual song was.
Yeah.
And because Kevin was so responding to it.
Yeah, you need the beats to match. Yeah.
Well, also it was so funny because Kevin, who's just tireless, we were all exhausted, and he was up for going again, because he's a great physical comic. So yeah, that was just one of those moments where things sort of came together, and where also you thought, okay, we so wanted to make this movie not a lecture on gay rights.
Yeah.
We wanted it to be way more fun than that and more entertaining, and that was everything in a nutshell. And it expressed what you were just talking about the way gay kids compartmentalize and protect themselves. And this was a release from all that.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's when you physicalize it. Yeah. That's the best. That's what makes it not a textbook.
Yeah.
So we had such a good time on that movie, because also I could walk to work. So that was nice too.
That was nice too. You write in the book I Shudder about when you started test screening it, people would lose their minds over the kiss between the two men.
Oh,
I remember that era. Like, I remember going to see Death Trap, the Michael Caine and Christopher Reeve, and being in the theater and people would be like, ah! Like, it was just like this visceral, crazy thing. And gosh, we've come a long way since then. But yeah, you write about how people were freaked out about the kiss.
Oh, no, that was when we had the test screening in Manhattan with a total demographic mix. They really work hard at every age, every race, every gender preference group. And I remember I was with Scott, and we were sitting behind a teenage couple, a boy and a girl.
Right.
And when they kissed, when the two guys kissed, all the girls loved it beyond belief. They thought it was so romantic. They were all sighing and clutching their hearts. The boys didn't know what to do with themselves. Right. So the teenage boy in front of us took 2 straws from their sodas and put them in his ears. And I thought, what, so he can't hear the kiss? And the popcorn was flying. And it was so funny, because you just thought, I was just so impressed that anything got such a visceral response, even if it was from people who were, my favorite response card, when you have focus groups, they fill out their opinions. And there was one woman who they said, what are your favorite scenes? Yeah. She could not stop listing what favorite characters, endless. She just loved everything. And then it said, would you recommend this movie to a friend? And she said, absolutely not. And it said, if no, why not? She wrote, against God's law. And
she
I
loved
thought,
everything,
everything, but God did not. And you thought, okay, you realize you're clinically insane.
Right.
But I love that somehow that was her process.
Yeah.
And that's, test marketing movies is always very fraught. And
I'm anxious thinking about it. Yeah, on your behalf.
Yeah, and on a movie like that where you thought, no, we're not going to make this movie less gay if someone fills out a card.
Yeah. But it did well, and, it got, there Oscar nominations, and
Joan got nominated because she was heavenly, and it was, it was very financially successful, and people, it's interesting, sometimes when movie executives try to, say no to gay projects. They'll say, I'd love to, but I'm gay, but it's not economically feasible. And then you start to list the movies from Brokeback Mountain to Moonlight to The Birdcage, and sometimes they'll leave out In and Out just because it was a comedy. And you think, no, that movie made a lot of money, so shut up. And, green light this project.
Yeah.
It was a big mainstream movie, and I was aware of that writing it, that I thought, okay, this isn't just for my friends in New York. Although I was able to take advantage in the movie of Jeffrey, which was was a much looser format.
Yeah.
There's a moment in that movie where the two guys kiss, and we cut to teenagers in a movie theater, and the girls are all going, oh, and the guys are all screaming with rage.
Right.
And then we kind of, and I love that I could reflect that and include it. But yeah, it's amazing what will still get people riled up.
You have a lot of fun with show business egos and stuff in your projects, making fun of Cats and Jeffrey and stuff like that. Has anyone ever taken offense, or anyone in your life felt like you were making fun of them, or did anything like that ever come back to you? Your stuff is so good-natured and fun, but I was just wondering if you ever, somebody was like, oh, I think you took that from me, and that's my thing.
No, although there was one wonderful moment on In and Out, actually, where Libby Gumman-Waxner, who was writing her column in Premiere Magazine, in which she, criticized movies on the most personal, irresponsible level possible. She had talked about Kevin's marriage to Phoebe Cates, beautiful actress who was much younger than Kevin.
Right.
And I believe Libby had said, let her mother worry about it. Well, Kevin had read this.
Right.
He brought it, and he was having so much fun because he could tell he's such a good actor that he was like, I was shaking, going, oh my God, is Kevin Kline going to kill me now?
Yeah.
And then he could not stop laughing, and he loved it. And it was, so that was the only moment where I actually encountered a movie star response. And I of course, was immediately going to blame Libby and say, well, you should go kill her.
Yeah, it's her problem. Yeah.
But otherwise, also, of course, I remember when we were talking to different directors and people about In and Out. And there was one director who was a notorious closet case, who had been married several times, but there was no one gayer. And when he read the script, he looked at it, and I was on the phone with him, and he paused and he said, I know someone just like this. And I thought, yeah, every day in the mirror, but it was like a thing where people are able to, blind themselves to just about anything. So, but yeah, no, otherwise, I think people, first of all, they like being written about.
Yeah.
That's why they become performers. And that they just usually have a sense of humor, which is pretty essential to my stuff. But, and I find it's sort of like the response to Jeffrey. There's a big scene with a Catholic priest. And I heard from so many priests who would write to me and say, that is exactly right. I love this, but you should not have written that. Yeah. It was so sweet that they both appreciate, also just the idea of a Catholic priest going to see Jeffrey was pretty great. But that they were scared of the exposure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always interesting to see how people respond.
Oh my God, I just had a flashback to a story. I'm going to tell it to you. It's quick. Jeffrey was coming out in theaters. I got invited to a test screening, and I had met somebody on an airplane, like a hot guy on an airplane. And it's never happened before, and we were going to have a date, and I was going to take him to this screening of Jeffrey. Because I have press screenings, so I'm a journalist, and I'm like, so it's cool. And so we go and we enjoy the movie, and he was really hot and handsome. And then we went back to his place, and he wanted to have sex, and I wasn't. It was like our first date, and I was a little more uptight back then. And so we didn't do it. This was after. And then he goes, okay, then do you mind if I just jack off? And I was like, okay, go ahead. It was the weirdest thing. But I just had this flashback of that moment. And I feel like if I had it to do over again, I would have been all over it. But I was younger and whatever. And also it was the 90s. We were all freaked out.
I was going to say, you were entitled to your, boundaries.
But I did just sat there. I just sat there, and he was like, all right, there I go. Anyway, here's a couple other things I wanted to bring up before I let you go. And I really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for giving me so much time.
Oh, me too.
When you first came to New York, I think in Ice Shutter, you write about doing some different odd jobs and things. What was the weirdest one? What was the weirdest job you did? Did you cater waiter at a certain point?
I cater waiter. I did. I was even lower on the food chain than I was a delivery boy. Because one of my favorite moments was I had no money. I was living in this hellhole, and I had fingerless gloves, little wool gloves with no fingers because I cut them off. And I once was delivering a stack of envelopes to a modeling agency, and there were a bunch of, goddessy female beautiful models sitting in the waiting area. And one of them looked at me and she said, "Oh, I love your gloves." She said, "How did you do that?" And I thought, "Oh, honey," it's like
she never heard of scissors. Yeah. Yeah.
It was. I thought you got to up your crafting game. But that was one of those New York jobs where you just got exposure to every possible world. Yeah. Well, I remember when I was doing that, I went to another building where the elevator doors opened, and a group of about the 8 handsomest men I have ever seen in my life emerged.
Right.
And they tended to have long flowing hair, but they were ridiculously well built and granite jawed. And I thought, okay, this is a portal to another universe. And I thought, why are they all here together?
Yeah.
And then I found out there was a casting call for the cover of a romance novel.
Oh.
They were all that specific breed of model who were there to hold a woman in their arms as a pirate or a lord of the manor. And so that was another thing where you thought every door in New York is an adventure.
Yeah.
So I did that. I also wrote book jacket copy back then, where I remember at first I was very diligent and I would read the book and I would really try to be specific to that author and that story.
Right.
And then someone made it clear to me, no, every writer is the voice of their generation. Every book is a thrill-packed joyride. You just had to go by the rules.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, okay, that I get.
That's a lot easier.
Yeah. No, I remember. And then, well, you were also a creature of remember when there were magazines in the world? The
best.
Exactly. The dinosaurs of their time, but they were wonderful. And I had a habit of, I would write for magazines and they would immediately fold. Remember magazines like Times, things like that. Remember Egg? It was just when a rich person had a little too much money, they would either open a restaurant or start a magazine. Yeah. And God bless them. Yeah. But it was, because I grew up reading magazines and that was your passport to that world. Yeah. So I did that because it didn't pay particularly. Although back then you may recall, there was a set of magazines that paid incredibly well.
No, I look back at that time. For me, that was pretty good times. Yeah. I first read you in Premiere magazine. I loved Premiere. I would read it cover to cover.
Oh yeah.
Libby Gelman-Waxner, your alter ego. What does she look like? Is she blonde? She's blonde, right? In your mind, what does she look like?
Robert G. Michel, this wonderful artist who's sadly no longer with us, but he created the visuals, which were the sketches of this beautiful blonde woman who looked like she had always just come back from shopping at a retail outlet. Right. And that was what Libby looked like. So what was fun was in the early years of Libby, people thought she was real, which she is. But Libby got marriage proposals. Yeah. There was, my favorite one was from a guy who said he was a part-time male model, also enrolled at Yale. And I thought, yeah, right, prove it. It was all true. And years later, I met this guy in New York at a cocktail party or something. He was straight. Oh, he said he would leave his girlfriend for Libby.
He loved her.
And so when I met him,
she's high maintenance, though. Did he know what he was in for? It was not going to be a breeze.
And she was married. She was willing to cheat on her husband, Josh, the orthodontist,
of course,
for Daniel Day-Lewis or Dennis Quaid, who at that time was not a Republican idiot, but was very sexy at that time. But when I met the actual model Yale graduate, we sort of enjoyed ourselves, but it was sort of odd as to, okay, which is more embarrassing? Proposing marriage to a fictional female movie critic or being a fictional female movie critic. So it was an interesting encounter.
Right.
But yeah, Libby was really fun to write because she was also when there was, got you into free screenings. Yeah. So it was, but yeah, that was.
I loved it. Every episode, every issue, that was the first thing I would go to. And then when I started doing magazines, I got to write a column that became Misadventures in the 213. And
I remember that.
Well, thank you. And I think one of the things I said when I pitched the idea was, like Libby Gelman-Waxner and Premiere would be like an ongoing thing. So it was a real touchstone. All of your work has been. So.
Oh, thank you.
This has been a real thrill for me. I just have a few more things. When did you first know you were funny? When did you know you could make people laugh?
Well, I came from a family that really valued humor because they were this big Jewish family.
Right.
That if you could make a joke about something, it would never be so terrible, Right. And my mother and her sisters had this comic rhythm around the Passover Seder table that was just absurd. And then when I finally wrote about them in an early novel called I'll Take It, they all said, we don't sound like that. And they would immediately sound like that.
Right.
But, so that was kind of like a comedy education in both the value of a sense of humor and speech rhythms, where it was like, is that what you're wearing?
Yeah.
Oh, he's entitled to his opinion, or you go live your life. Whatever they would say that would be seemingly blameless and yet a death sentence. So that was kind of where I realized being funny was valuable.
Right.
So then actually getting to be funny took a lot longer, where I realized, especially in the theater where they either laugh or they don't. And that's a high wire, which I really enjoyed, but it's very scary because you realize if the joke doesn't work, you can't keep insisting that it does.
Right.
You can't say, no, that's funny. Why aren't they laughing? They're stupid. You say, nope, they're not laughing. Fix it.
Yeah, they either laugh or they don't. It's an involuntary thing. I think because you write about rich people so well, people might assume that you always had money or you were always, but that wasn't the case at all. When you first started making good money, was there something you treated yourself to that felt like a splurge? Like, okay, this is my.
I paid off my student loans.
That was a big thing, and you remember that moment.
That was a huge thing, yeah. Because you realized every month I was not going to have to panic. I was not going to have to figure out how to get that money together, and I would never get those notices ever again.
Yeah.
That felt so good.
Did you celebrate?
It was, also like. Oh, I didn't have to. I was just so happy.
Yeah.
I was so like, it's again, that thing about about relief, where it wells up in you and you go, you could, each month when I didn't have to pay the student loan again, I would feel it like, an angel on my shoulder. And it was just a particular joy as to whether because I was so broke, I had limited pleasures that were also enormous. When I could reward myself with a Snickers bar,
right? Or
if I was going to the cash machine, which was far uptown, I would walk because I could not afford the subway.
Right.
So it was, my treats were usually trying to think. Candy or Entenmann's products,
right?
That I couldn't afford clothes. I couldn't afford. Also, well, that was why, because New York was broke at that point, and when you're young, you can wear rags, and God bless William Ives Long. I would go to the big costume shops, which existed then, and go through the boxes of ancient T-shirts, and that was great club wear at that time. When
it was cool. It had history.
Yeah. So So I had simple pleasures.
Simple pleasures. But you look back and you're like, oh, that was kind of a sweet time, kind of a magic time, I would think. Bringing it back to What Is Wrong With You, your new novel, there's a sequence at the end involving technology that deals with the theme of love. And it's so beautifully written. And I just loved imagining it unfolding. I won't give away more than that. But visually, it's really cool. What do you believe about love now that you've written about it? Now that you've lived, on this earth for a while?
I've been with the same guy for over 30 years. But it's, the book really reflects that it is uncontrollable, that no matter how much you try to regiment love or predict it or draw it to you, that's all nonsense. It's never going to work. So, and it's kind of great that it defeats AI, that it's like, no, it's, with all the people going on Grindr and Hinge and Bumble and everything else, Godspeed, that. But it's still like the crapshoot of love, that the idea that some of us sometimes meet someone where things suddenly make that much sense is just the best gift, and so unlikely, because you think there are so many people in the world. So it's, I just like the wildness of it, and that sense of, I figure out more about it every day, even with John, with my husband, where I think I learned when to hold my tongue and when not to.
Right.
That you think, oh my God, this is just, I think there's a mistake that people make in imagining that once you've fallen in love, or once you've gotten married, or once you've are living together, that you get to relax and only be yourself, and the other person will love everything you do and every aspect of you. It's like, no, you're not that perfect. You're not that special. Stop it. And they aren't either. So that it's always an education, and it's the best because, nothing beats love. And it's also indefinable, which is one of those things that keeps me writing, where I think, okay, if I could really nail it, if I could really define love forever for everyone, I'd be done.
Right.
And that's what Is Wrong With You is kind of about, because all these people, value love, and they search for it, and they're grateful for it, and they mess it up instantly. Yeah. So I have no answers either, but I love that search. I think it's so human. And it's, you can write about that forever.
And it's not just romantic love that you write about. There's a moment between Rob and the trainer, Sean, that's very loving, and they articulate something. And it was like, oh, yes, there's all kinds of this thing called love. Have you ever been on an airplane when they were showing one of your movies?
That's a good question. Now they have libraries of movies, so I assume it's happened. But now everybody's watching the movie on the seat back in front of them. So when it was up there, I don't remember. I think I would be very grateful that people had headsets so that I could imagine they were laughing.
They were laughing. You could tell. Yeah.
But no, that was when I was in my younger days, I was so obsessive that when I was watching a movie or play that I'd done, I would make deals with God, where if the audience would laugh at the next joke, he could have like my finger, or he could have my forearm, or he could have my leg from the knee down. And by the end of any movie or play, I would be like a limbless torso for making all these deals. And then as soon as it was over, I would take it all back.
Of course.
As if God had been listening, but I was smarter. So, and that was like the stupidest thing. I mean, it was a way to really give yourself a constant breakdown. So that was how I tended to watch things until I said, that unless you want to go on medication, you should stop doing that.
Yeah.
But that's why I love writing books, because I imagine the reader is chortling away, but I don't have to ask for proof.
Right.
But it's, so I assume I've been on a plane, but I can't remember a specific instance.
Yeah. So the book is What Is Wrong With You? Are there any events or anything that people can get it wherever they get their books, right? Or is there anything else you want people to know about it?
They can. It was published about a week ago, and you can get it on Barnes & Noble at any bookseller, and enjoy it. I hope people have a great time. And we just had a nice launch in New York at Rizzoli, where I got to have a conversation with Christine Baranski, who I've worked with a bunch, and who was just so gracious. And she's just the funniest, smartest person on the planet. So we had such a good time and with a great crowd. So I'll be doing other events like that. But what's wonderful, I love doing Zooming with you. I mean, this is just the way I think books are popularized and sold now is through these conversations. So I'm so grateful. And it's, and through all the people on, Book Talk, but also elsewhere, the book clubs. I mean, I've gone to meet with some book clubs, and they're the best people, because I just am so thrilled by anyone who reads a book, for one thing. And when they read mine, so much the better. But I love having those conversations where I realize, they actually finished it.
Yeah.
So I hope that will all continue.
I love that. I have two final questions. One is a little silly and one is a little more serious. My silly one is, what is wrong with you? If somebody were to ask that of you, what would your answer be?
Oh, if people ask that of me endlessly all day long, that's why I realized that was a good title. Right. Because people love to say it, and it's when you get that stare where someone says, what is wrong with you? And I use it too on people where they say something absurdly stupid or self-involved, and you just go, you need to be diagnosed.
Right.
You need a prescription if you're capable of saying what you just said. Right. So what is wrong with me? The only answer for any of us is everything.
I like that.
Ask myself. Yeah.
That reminded me of something that you write later in the book, where you just sort of say it's hard to be a man. It's hard to be a person. And I think the older I get, I think that's sort of my thesis statement. It's kind of what we talk about on this podcast all along. Here's my final question. Creative careers go through ups and downs. What's kept you going?
I think because you have to love what you do, because if you get your only satisfaction from success, whether it's monetary, commercial, audience applause, whatever, you're in trouble, because all of that stuff is wonderful. And I've had it at times and not had it many more times. So it's one of the things I've always loved about writing is that I'm a self-starter. I can always, if I have the worst disaster of all time, I can go home and start a new book, writing a new book. No one can stop me from doing that. Maybe they won't publish it. Maybe somebody will read it, throw it across the room. But I get to be in charge of that. And it's incredibly satisfying. And I realize, okay, this is using whatever talent I have. So it's, I think that's what gets you through. And because you have to, and I've seen this with people I know who've sometimes retired from various entertainment careers, that where the downside becomes too great, where they're not enjoying it anymore. But I find that writing still is such a pleasure for me, even when it's not going well. It uses the most of me, and I love that. So I thought, no, I can't stop. I'd be too unhappy.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful and inspiring. Paul, thank you so much for giving me so much time. I've loved this conversation. Your work's meant so much to me throughout my journey.
Me too.
And I look forward to reading more and more. So thank you for this.
I'll do what I can, but this has been a total treat. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks again to Paul Rudnick. Pick up his new book, What Is Wrong With You? You might also like his previous book. I certainly did. It is Farrell, Covington, and the Limits of Style. And here's a little backstory on getting Paul Rudnick on the podcast. And it's dream board related for those of you out there who love when I talk about my dream board. Around the first of the year, I saw that Paul had a new book coming out. The cover must have been somewhere that I saw. So I did a screen grab of it. It ended up on my dream board. And then I kind of forgot. And Tim Murphy, who is an author, and he also has a wonderful Substack called The Caftan Chronicles. Tim's been on the podcast before. I noticed that Paul did an interview with The Caftan Chronicles, and I was like, oh, that's right, he's got a book coming out. And then there was the part of me that's like, oh, it's probably too late, and it's already out. Like, I kind of was like in my head around it. And then I was like, you know what, Dennis, you put him on your dream board. So just go to his website and see what's up. So I go there, and by the way, his website is really cool, the way it's divided in his sections. Design Applause, which is no surprise because he's good at design stuff. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, there's a book contact, so I'm going to send a thing to Simon & Schuster. And a lot of times I do that, and they just go into the void, and I never hear anything. So I did that. Next morning, I get an email from Paul himself, and it's on. And I don't know if I would have pushed through all of that little friction I had in my head if it hadn't been on my dream board. So there's that. All right. Oh, so this happened. Okay, so the White Lotus finale happened. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was riveted. You know, when I saw The Good Girl screening a few weeks ago, Mike White was actually there. And I was going to the restroom. This was at Vidiot's. And he was just sitting there in a chair by himself, like in the back row. And I was like, if I'd had time to think about it, I would have said something. But what I wanted to say was, thank you, Mike White, for giving the entire world something to lose ourselves in, during this crazy, horrible time in our history. Like, whether you like this plot or that plot or this character or whatever, we were in it. And everyone was, and it was just a great thing that he gave to the world. And I hope I hope it's like White Lotus Dubuque. I hope they just keep doing it, because I'm into it. And so I watched it at my friends Doug and John's place with a group of guys, and I was riveted. And there was the Carrie Coon monologue about friendship with the three women at the dinner table. That hit me so hard because friendship is my story. That's my people. Those are my relationships. That's what I write about in my books and stuff. Like, that's my primary love. Those are the loves of my life. And so when she articulated it in that way, like that I'm here with you, that we sort of see each other through things, I kind of lost it, and I was just crying really hard. And then we took a break right after that, an intermission and a pee break, and had dessert. And my friend Danny was like, I think the bathroom's open. Like, I think he was trying to say, like, you're sobbing, maybe go to the, But you know what? I'm very unabashed about my crying now. I don't care. I cry a lot. And I was thinking about why that is. And I don't think it's bad. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe if I were in the room with it, it would be uncomfortable. But I don't know. Maybe it's the age I'm at, the stuff I'm going through, the circumstances of life, the world that we live in, and also like I think there's a part of all this mindfulness and happiness stuff that tries to keep you in the moment a little bit, and maybe that's part of why the emotions are more right there for me. Anyway, and it's not always sad things I cry at. I cry at beautiful things. Anyway, I'm basically the John Boehner of the gay podcast world. Anyway, but I cried. Anyway, kudos to Mike White and everyone at White Lotus. And here is my tease for the Patreon. Here's why you have to get on the Patreon. So this week I had a teeth cleaning scheduled, and money's really tight right now. It's not a joke, kids. And I was like, maybe I cancel it or postpone it. And then I was like, no, you got to get your teeth cleaned. Like, and it may be too late to cancel, whatever. So I'm like, I'm going to go get my teeth cleaned and put it on a credit card. And, here we go. Hope my teeth stay in. So I do it. I go there. My hygienist is really nice. And, I'm getting in the chair and all that. And I said, oh, did you watch White Lotus? And she goes, oh, I need to watch it. I've only seen the first episode of the new season. I said, it's so good. And she goes, well, 3 of the cast members are clients of mine. I clean their teeth and they come here and they're so nice. And so she just talked about how awesome these clients are. And if you want to hear who the 3 people are that we share a dental hygienist, you have to get the Patreon, patreon.com. search Dennis Anyone. And by all accounts from her, these people are very nice, which was nice to hear. And one of them is going to be featured in my Remember Magazines, They Were a Thing section of my Patreon, because I interviewed this person a number of years ago for a magazine. And throughout all my career of interviewing, there have been like a handful of people, I would say maybe 5 or so, that sent thank you notes afterwards. And not that you have to, but I always remembered it. It was very thoughtful. And I always tried to do that when I was being interviewed about books or whatever. And I always remembered it. So this person sent a thank you note. They crushed it on White Lotus. And to find out who that is, go to patreon.com. It's $5 a month. I do 4 episodes. It's fun content. And, all the Dreamboard talk you could ever want. All right, that's enough for this week. I want to thank Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. I want to say my theme music. It's by Mark Daniels for placement music. We will catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.